Hello, my friends. Welcome back to Cloud Wars Live. We are digging into the digital revolution that is changing every facet of our lives. We are trying to also to figure out what's going on these days in the crazy global economy and the impact that so much of the disruption is having on things. And we've gotten used to dealing with some uncertainty, but I think uncertainty is really sort of the order of the day today. So as we swing to one of our favorite monthly guests, digital all-star Pat Fitzgerald. Pat has had a terrific career in the tech market as a recruiter, an executive recruiter. He's got his own company now called Career Ave, which he's the co-founder. Pat, it's great to have you.
Thanks, Bob. It's good to be back. Appreciate it.
And Pat, so today, right, we've got these crazy things because on the one hand, we got some statistics saying that unemployment is incredibly low. On the other side, there's, I think, probably a lot of anxiety among people. We've seen some companies that a year ago would have said would never lay people off, and now they are. So it's just a strange environment right now. Pat, what are you hearing these days?
Well, and I agree. I think, really the unemployment rate is kind of and I don't, never want to be political on this, but, it's a mixed bag of, are they all full-time? Are they really professional level? And I don't know the details on that. So the question is, are there really good paying jobs being created for the future generations? And we've talked a lot about this in the past, Bob, but also to your point, a lot of our clients, a lot of our friends that you and I have worked with over the years, in the tech marketplace have done or are doing, they're all doing hiring freezes. Many of them have already done, layoffs. And I think we will continue to see that. I think that, which obviously allows for you and me to talk about a topic we talked about in the past, which is, how to deal with the marketplace, especially in turmoil, which we may very well see. I don't know what January is going to bring, but I do think it's going to be a challenging year, 2023, for all of the tech companies. So I think, and we're going to find that a lot of those players that we know and the early talent, which is a topic that's on my heart lately, about, how do they differentiate themselves and how do they think differently around getting into the marketplace. So I'd love to be able to, chat about that and then give some advice to our senior level players that are in the interview cycle, asking questions they've never asked before. And I think that's going to be a big asset hopefully it'll be a big asset for many of us.
Well, Pat, that sounds like, some fascinating stuff there. And I love it how you're, the folks you talk to and counsel and deal with and that you hear from all the time, they span everything from, senior level executives to college kids and even into high school, right? You're encouraging that early talent, people to, start to think about this. So, Pat, how does that spectrum look to you, ranging from seniors to the early talent that you described?
So one of the things that my partner, Mark Hatfield, and I do is we try really hard to give back to the community. We volunteer at high schools and some of the private high schools and what have you, and just, talk about the marketplace and how to interview and what have you. One of the things that's really been on my heart lately is the high school kids. We talk a lot about college grads, and I want to also talk about that a little bit today too, but the high school grads, and I'm a big advocate of college. I think college is a big asset for everybody if it's done for the right reason. Yeah. With the average cost of college in America today at $38,000, never mind, room and board, the question is, does everyone have to go to college? And we all know that over the last decade, that's become a big push. And I don't fault it, right? Everyone wants to advance their children. So I know we're not going to be talking to high school kids today because they're not necessarily listening to this, but hopefully we're going to be talking to those parents of high school kids, and I have a lot, I've learned a lot, and I've experienced an awful lot of this and my conversations with some of the high schools that we talk to, which is high school today is challenging. First and foremost, everyone needs a high school education. If you're going to be successful in America, stay in high school, get a high school education. There isn't a necessary drive, in my opinion. This is Pat's opinion, so I'm not trying to say this is founded on, facts other than success that I've seen over the years. Not everyone needs to go to college, But everyone needs to think about whether or not they should go into a trade school or an apprenticeship or
Yeah.
even the military. I'm a big believer that the military, for the right people, is the right avenue, especially someone coming out of a high school degree. When my kids were young, my kids are older now. Bob and I talk a lot about this and our grandchildren, which is wonderful. But I made my kids read the original book. Now it's about 30 years old today, of The Millionaire Next Door. And I would encourage parents of high school kids to do that, to actually encourage them. And I know there's several editions and renditions of The Millionaire Next Door. I don't know how many, but I'm going to encourage people to go all the way back to the first one, because I thought the first one, 100+ pages, very impactful around the way people should be thinking, about work and, frankly, what their opportunities could be. I'm a big fan of, certainly the trades. I love trade schools. Mark and I try really hard to talk at trade schools because we think there's a huge advantage. So my comment today, especially to parents that are high school kids, look into other variations. There's tremendous opportunities. The apprenticeships. I mean, just ask yourself, what does your electrician make? What does your plumber make? Those are the sort of questions that I think is really important in today's marketplace. All right. So again, moving on to the grads, the college graduates. I've had the opportunity to listen to and talk to a lot of college graduates over the years. And recently what I'm hearing is that and I don't mean this to sound negative, but there is a bit of an entitlement that's being taught in our universities, right? They're owed something. And that troubles me. And I'm not saying it's across the board, but there's an inkling of it in the marketplace. For college graduates, unless you went to college to be a lawyer or a doctor and, whatever, the likelihood is, I don't know what the percentages are, but let's take the 80-20 rule. 80% of college graduates today kind of fall into their career. They may have an idea of what they want, right? But in the end, they may not get that job. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. You can still navigate once you're in a company. My encouragement to college graduates is two things. One, you've got to differentiate yourself in the interview cycle, right? We can talk about the extroverts, the Bill McDermotts, the salespeople that are just natural in an interview and everyone loves them, versus the extrovert, versus the introvert. I'm an introvert. I've had to learn how to be outwardly, conversational with a lot of people. It's not something that comes natural to me. But for the introvert, my encouragement is, and let's take all the engineers or a lot of the players in the marketplace that frankly aren't salespeople.
Yeah.
Differentiate yourself by doing research. And in today's world, research is so easy. It was so hard. And when you and I were growing up, we had to make phone calls to people that we knew versus actually going on the internet. But do the research, know about the company, have talking points that will allow you to be to show that you really are interested, that you're different than the rest of the candidates that are just coming through, and really just doing the interview because, it's a step in the process. The other thing that I find is really interesting is because of social media, once you know who you're interviewing with, you can go out and research the interviewers.
Yeah.
Find out what they like, find out what kind of personality they are. What you need to do and what you need to accomplish in the interview is make a connection.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you're not going to make a connection with the hiring manager, but maybe you're making a connection with the peer interviewer. You need an advocate in the interview cycle that's going to go back at the end of the day when they do the debriefing of all the candidates they met and say, well, I met Bob and I liked him. I connected with him. Now you've made yourself, you've differentiated yourself in the interview cycle. And that's important for you to be able to do. And it isn't always because you're an extrovert, because you just have this natural people skill. You can be frankly, a frightening introvert and still do the research and make a personal connection. The likelihood is, if you're in an interview for an engineering position, one of the interviewers, or maybe more than one of the interviews, are also introverts.
Yeah.
Make that connection. Do your research, and more research you can do on the company, so you can actually have some really good questions. You can ask hard questions about conversational points about where the company's going, and hey, I just saw you bought this company. That makes you different in the interview cycle.
Well, Pat, the differentiation I think is so critical there. It's great advice. And I think there's probably a lot of people who fall more on the introvert end of the spectrum who say, well, to differentiate myself, I guess I have to try to pretend I'm an extrovert, which will not work. So that genuine nature of, here's what I'm really good at, here's what I can dig into. I care enough about this opportunity that you've given me with this interview to find out about your company, what you do, your market, your competitors, and you, the person I'm talking to here, Pat. So it's great advice, but don't try to be somebody you're not, right?
No, exactly. Be yourself. And I coach a lot of people in the interview cycle. I'm very fortunate. My career has been able to allow me to do that. And I always end at the coaching session before the interview. Have fun.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Draw a curtain down between all your anxiety, right? Don't worry about getting an offer. Worry about the interview. Just focus on the interview. Don't worry about whatever next steps.
Yeah.
Focus on the interview, be yourself, have fun. And it's going to resonate with the interviewers, that, wow, I like this guy. I could work with this person, right? And that's important for them to, again, make a connection. And that's what's really important. Enjoy yourself and have fun.
Well, Pat, I'm going to put you on the spot here just a little bit in a friendly way. But at the beginning, you said, now this is just Pat's opinion. This isn't based on a lot of data, but how many people would, approximately have you sort of advised or counseled about this sort of thing, right? It's probably a pretty meaty number, right? Mm-hmm. You've got a real big base from which you're offering this advice here.
So I'm very fortunate, Bob, to have spent a lot of time with the early talent. I played a role in the companies I worked for, to really be able to talk to them once they were on board. I've done two things. One, I still to this day coach people in their interviews, and I've done it from individual contributor all the way up to CEO level player. Yeah. But the other thing that I've done, and I've been very fortunate, is, and I want to talk about this as a next step, which is once you're in the job, figure out who your assets are in that company. And so what I've done a tremendous amount of coaching is, once you're in the company, how do you navigate to the right position that you really want, or you're better yet, maybe you don't know you want it, but you're actually very good at, because you've now started to realize, oh, I have these strengths here, and I didn't think I had those strengths, because now I'm in this company and I'm starting to learn about my own abilities. So it's the idea of coaching someone, whether it be for a first-time interview or once they're in the company, and I still do an awful lot of that coaching when they're in the company. How do you navigate, and how do you really build your career? Because frankly, it's on you. It really is you, the individual. There are people that will be your advocate. Very few individual contributors or middle managers end up with advocates. You really need to get up to that executive level. But so you can't assume that you're going to have an advocate. So you've got to be the one that actually asks the hard questions and learns how to navigate within the company. So the answer to you is, I don't know the number. I'm blessed to say it's thousands.
Yeah. Well, Pat, the other thing that seems to be happening now is, and I think it really builds nicely with what you were saying a moment ago about early talent. You've got a pretty good sense of what you want to do, but in our early 20s, mid 20s, you don't always know exactly everything that comes along, or an emerging talent. And then from the other side, you've got these companies that are themselves transforming and changing dramatically now. So what the company might have wanted 2 or 3 years ago, it might be very different what they want now. And you might be right in the midst of something like, hey, we've never had this position before. We're creating some new ones to meet new opportunities we've got going on. So that sense of flexibility and a broad range of our being able to project, these are the tools I have. This is sort of broadly what I think I'd like to do, but I'm not going to sit and wait for this one real narrow position that I think is perfect. You've talked before, Pat, about the need, jump into some opportunities with exciting companies, right? To understand what it is that really makes your heart beat faster. What do those companies value more clearly? Where is the market, are the market trends heading? And how can that all sort of cascade together to build this career instead of just, one-off opportunities.
Yeah, and when you step back when you're young, you don't think about this, but when you step back and realize my career will span what, 35 years, 30 years, 40 years, I don't know, depending upon, frankly, how successful you are.
Yeah.
You have a huge opportunity to actually realize that I've got to learn how to adjust and navigate versus expect, that I'm going to get the job I want right out of the graduate university degree that I have. So what I strongly suggest, particularly early talent, is look for companies in the field you feel like you want to be.
Mhm.
The bigger companies will naturally have bigger training programs. Identify companies that you can identify in the industries you like that actually have the funding and the training programs. But here's where I'm struggling with today's early talent, because I'm reading, I'm hearing it from them, and I'm hearing it from my clients, my companies, that early talent today goes into the job and kind of immediately expects that they're going to get promotability. And what I'm finding is that a lot of early talent is making a huge mistake in their career by actually moving from one job to another, from one company to another after 12 months, because the next company offers them something a little worth more money, or worse or better, actually offers them a step forward. My advice is don't. That's a mistake.
Mhm.
The company that you work for needs to be the place that you prove you've got the abilities to get hired, be successful in the job, and then take a promotion. One of the things that I've always looked for in a resume, particularly of an early talent, individual contributor, is, did you stay long enough at a company and they valued you and you got a promotion? Versus what we still to this day call job jumpers that move from one company to the next for that promotion. And again, I'm not saying it's bad, but I do think in time it'll come back and haunt you.
Uh-huh. Pat, some of the things you talked to about as well there, at a different point in the new nature of the sort of questions that the applicant or the interviewee has to raise. And does that span, Pat, from, some entry-ish level positions all the way up to seniors?
Yeah, I mean, again, because of the internet today, and it doesn't matter what level you're interviewing for, you need to do your homework. You need to put an effort into finding out what the company does, what's their success, what have they, financially, where do they stand? Are they upside down? Who's their, if it's a pre-IPO, who's their private equity? How much do they have, and does the private equity have invested? And what percentage of company do they get with that investment? Yeah. In today's market, and I'm again not trying to be political, because I just think the economy certainly is going to continue to falter or stumble. I don't know, but I think for the next 12 to maybe even 24 months, we have to be asking the questions. And this is a topic I encourage more of those executives and middle managers that are looking for the equity stake. I'm saying to them, you really need to ask, do you have the funds for a prolonged downturn?
Yeah.
Have you, and if you're a private equity funded or venture funded company, does your private equity partner have the funds? A lot of, we're blessed to have private equity investors out there for sure. But a lot of the smaller mid-tier private equity companies have invested their money into their portfolio. Do they have enough operating capital to, really ride out a downturn, whether it be 12 months or more, before they start yanking funds back out of their portfolio to be able to sustain their own, their own ability? And so I'm encouraging, I say to my friends and the people I coach at the executive level, you have to ask questions you've never asked before. Yeah. And it's hard to ask that question, but you need to know, especially if you're at that point in your career where maybe this is your last step and
Yeah.
it's a private equity funded, and and it pays you out to be able to retire the way you desire. You need to be able to ask the harder questions that we've never asked these before.
Yeah, and Pat, if on the other end, when those questions are asked, if the person, say at a PE firm or the PE funded firm, if they get real bristly and defensive about that, maybe that's an indication that,
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
Maybe they do have enough money to ride out 10 downturns, but if they can't see that this is a part of today's reality, then maybe that's not a good place to land. So a new sets of questions to align with the circumstances that exist today, and as you said, are likely to be here for another 12 months, maybe a little more.
Yeah. And it goes back to even the middle management players that we certainly talk to, and that really do run the businesses. You need to know, especially if you're affected in a layoff, you need to also recognize that maybe now in today's economy isn't the time for you to be looking for that high risk reward scenario that you might have looked for 2 years ago. Maybe the bigger company is the place to land, knowing that they're funded well. They're big companies, big tech companies out there, they got plenty of money in the bank so they can survive the downturn. Maybe it's the place for you to take a career opportunity for the next couple of years. You can navigate once in the company, or again, use that as a platform to build your strengths, get more education, get the distance learning opportunities to to really continue to grow your skill sets, and then decide when the economy frankly stabilizes, that maybe then you're going to be going back into that high risk reward opportunity that you're looking for.
Yeah. Well, Pat, a couple of things that jumped out to me from your conversation today was one about the need at any stage to differentiate, to be aware of the current climate, to assess that within any individual's own directions, goals, the arc of the career they want to build. But also this really came through about these questions, right? At a time like this, it's perfectly okay for the company doing the interviewing to ask the applicant a different sort of questions, some tougher ones, harder ones. What goes in the other direction as well, right? So it can feel a little uncomfortable, but the applicant has rights too, and is to take that accountability and responsibility on yourself to say, I am going to ask some of these questions, and if it makes somebody uncomfortable, then maybe that's not a good fit.
Right. And it doesn't matter what level you're at. The interview is a very challenging opportunity. I don't care how good you are, how professional you are. And so what I encourage everyone is, don't worry about getting an offer. Don't worry about the future. Worry about the interview, the moment, today, the interview you're in. Draw a curtain down for the future, and just say, I'm going to be my best. I'm going to be myself. I'm going to be my best. I'm going to be prepared. I'm going to ask the right questions. I'm going to ingratiate myself so that I do end up with some I look forward to being a little bit personal so I can make a few connections in the interview cycle. But don't worry about what the result is. Don't worry about it. Just be yourself and really work hard to do the interview for the moment. If it goes well, great. If it doesn't go well, then frankly, it's not a company you want to be at anyways.
Yeah.
And then, I always say to my, the people that I coach, take each interview cycle as an individual segment and be prepared for it. And at the end, if you get the offer, then you get to choose whether or not you're going to accept it or not. Don't worry about getting the offer in the interview, because it'll distract you from exactly the opportunity you have to present yourself and frankly, give them a real view of not only who you are, but your skill sets and your capabilities and your passions and, the dynamics that matter in the interview to make that connection.
Yeah. So Pat, it's almost like when you put those curtains up around and put your worries and concerns outside of there. In doing that, you open up the curtain inside to let those other people see who this person is.
Exactly.
So I love that. Have fun.
Right. And as we see the market continuing to struggle, we will see the companies today that are interviewing multiple people for that same role. You have to assume that. So how do you differentiate yourself in the slate of candidates that company is interviewing? Whether you be a college graduate and you're just getting your first entry level role, or you're a C-suite player that's looking for that equity stake, to really build your portfolio for retirement.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It's the same mental attitude of being yourself, having fun, but being prepared.
Yeah. Yeah. So Pat, I love the book recommendation too about the Millionaire Next Door, that would be a good book for high school, early college students to read. And then also, Pat, for people who would like to see more about, what you and your company do, where could they find that?
Appreciate that, Bob. So Mark Hatfield and I are partners in this business. It's Career Ave, and our website is careerav.com.
Okay. All right. Well, Patrick, as always, it's a pleasure. Great stuff. Love the thoughts, love the advice here. And as we're recording this, we're about 10 days out from Thanksgiving. So I wish you and your family a very, very fabulous Thanksgiving holiday.
You also enjoy your family time and your new grandchildren. It's just such a blessing to have family around, isn't it? So thank you, Bob. I appreciate it.
All right, Pat, thank you. And folks, thanks to all of you for being with us here. Hope your holidays go well. We look forward to seeing you again soon here at Cloud Wars Live.